Joining me is the Opposition's Home Affairs spokesman, Karen Andrews, who was Home Affairs Minister in the Morrison government in charge of immigration. Karen Andrews, thank you for your time. How have we ended up with 100,000 people claiming to be asylum seekers, all in Australia, even after 2/3 of them were ruled out as fakes?
Look, I think that what we need to start looking at and encouraging the Labor government to do is to continue to deal with some of these issues. Now, migration, immigration are ongoing issues for this country. So there's clearly a lot of work that needs to be done. And let's also be clear that immigration policy should never be a set and forget. So there will always be various iterations of it. But what we do know is that our borders were closed for pretty much 2 years. During that time, we had significant issues that we faced here in Australia and also globally. There were people here who were unable to work, who wanted to work. There were people who wanted to stay here that were unable to stay here at that point in time. But now the borders are open and there are opportunities for us to be able to bring in the people that we need to fill the jobs that are desperately needing to be filled here in Australia.
But 100,000, that was basically under your watch too. How do we end up with 100,000 people, asylum seekers, taking on average 2.5 years to crawl through our courts, trying multiple venues to try and, sneak a decision in their favour. And we're funding this legal circus and they're still here, although most have been told you're not real asylum seekers. We've been exploited for too long. Have you been at fault here?
No, I don't think that we have been at fault, although the legal system in Australia has provided many opportunities for people to continuously take claims to the courts here in Australia. And maybe that's an issue that we need to look at in terms of the opportunities, if I put it that way, for people to be able to seek to stay in this country. Now, there have been examples of people who have been found by the courts to not have been genuine asylum seekers that were not owed any protection at all from Australia, but they still stayed in Australia and they continued to challenge those decisions to look at other ways for them to stay here in Australia. So we are well past the time of needing to do something to bring these matters to a conclusion. But unfortunately, the legal system that we have here in Australia allows endless opportunities for people to remain in Australia.
I've seen cases where they go to a migration review tribunal. You get people from Sri Lanka. There's no real persecution there. You get people from Malaysia. Again, why are we accepting them? They go to the migration tribunal. They get knocked back. They go to the review tribunal. They get knocked back. They go to the federal court. They get knocked back. They go to the full bench of the federal court. They get knocked back. They go to the high court, or the Biloela family or whatever. And in the meantime, they can lodge multiple other reasons for, judicial appeal, reviews and all that kind of stuff. It is a circus. Shouldn't you have knocked out some of these legal avenues?
Well, I think, to be absolutely frank with you, Andrew, I think that is probably a fair criticism. That we should have done more during our time in government. We should have done all that we could to finalise these cases. And the family that you mentioned, known as the Biloela family, were a very good example of where there had been multiple times that family had been found to not be owed protection by Australia. Now, the current government has taken its own decision there, but there was an enormous amount of time and effort that was spent just dealing with one particular issue. And as you've said, there are many people in similar situations that are quite frankly just taking Australia and Australians for a ride.
Yeah, absolutely, but not more needs to be done. But you're right to point out the Biloela family, because you copped a lot of criticism because you didn't let them stay, even though they failed every single court and tribunal challenge, every single one. And the Albanese government comes in and says, well, you can do all that, you can be told to go away, and you still can stay. Bad mistake. Now, as I said before in my editorial, I was struck by the reaction this week from Martin Parkinson. He's the man the Albanese government has appointed to investigate problems with the immigration system. He said, I think it's incredibly complex and it's very hard for potential migrants to navigate. It's very hard for employers to navigate. It leaves open the risk that in some cases, migrants are exposed to exploitation. Karen Andrews, this is missing the point. The people being exploited in this case aren't the migrants. These are asylum seekers, so-called, who are exploiting Australians. Is that not correct?
Look, Andrew, I absolutely agree with your point of view on that particular issue. Look, I think that it's all well and good for us to be compassionate, to look at what we can do to support people in their time of need. But ultimately, the role of a government is to do its absolute best to support Australian people. So I think that in terms of who's been taken for a ride and who's been disadvantaged, the Australian people clearly are at a disadvantage. There's a lot of resources, there's a lot of time that's put into managing migration issues. And I think that we are well past the time of being able to keep going the way that we are. Now, clearly, what Michael Parkinson might well do is quite different to what I would have done if I was in his position. I would be looking at the impacts on Australian businesses, on the Australian economy, and how we can make sure that we are supporting those businesses, because if we don't have strong businesses, if we don't have the economic growth here in Australia, we won't have jobs for people and we won't be able to support our children and our grandchildren, and that's what we need to be doing. So I think there needs to be a balanced approach to any migration review, and that we need to be very careful that we're focusing on Australians' needs and not just how we can accommodate anyone else who chooses to come to this country, particularly those that choose to come here illegally.
Karen Andrews, thank you so much for your time.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.